Hi guys, welcome back to Waxing On. It's Wednesday, that means classic rock. And today we're going to look at a band that was formed in late 60s. Um, in the 60s we had one of our first big supergroups, Cream, Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker. Now that band disbanded and Baker and Clapton went on to work in Blind Faith. They put an album out, and again, that one had a very short lifespan. When they disbanded, Ginger Baker put together his own group, and it was called Ginger Baker's Air Force. And that's what we're going to look at today. Now, he put out two albums in 1970. One was a live album recorded at the Royal Albert Hall, and it was made up of him and a few special guests. I'll just give you an idea who was on here. Denny Laine had been with the Moody Blues, and later in his career worked with Wings with Paul McCartney, and Steve Winwood. So Winwood, I think, had also worked with them during the Blind Faith era. But anyways, it was made up of a large group of people, and Baker moved from the rock into more jazz rock, folk, and what would later become known as world music. So he had a very different take on things than when he was working with Blind Faith or with Cream. So this album was very much his own band and his own control. Now, I'm looking at the second album, Ginger Baker's Air Force 2. Now, this was the album that I found I enjoyed better than the other. The live album was great, and I always tell you, buy the live albums or a greatest hits album. This time, I went with the studio album. Really meant more to me when I listened to it. And again, a lot of horns. That's one of the things he did. He included a lot of horns in the section now. And they've got a version on here I'll get to in a minute. It was Sunshine of Your Love, the old Cream tune, but totally different take on it with the horn section. I mean, it's really interesting. Baker never got the attention that Clapton got, but he did have a very vast catalog out there. He was doing a lot of recording, a lot of playing. And to me, he was one of the real powerhouse drummers that came out of the 60s. Anyways, let's take a look at the album. Ginger Baker's Air Force 2, and it was recorded in 1970, released later. Both this one and the first Ginger Baker's Air Force both recorded in 1970. One was early in the year, this one was released in December. Okay, here's what we got for tunes. We got a few written by Baker himself, but here's the songs. Let Me Ride, we got Sweet Wine, one of Baker's. Baker's has Do You Know Who Your Friends Are, We Free Kings, Today, I Don't Want to Go On Without You, Toady by Baker, and 12 Gates to the City. Now, that was the track listing on the USA version. There was another album came out that says here in the German, French, Spanish, New Zealand version, they had a little different track listing. We Free Kings, Caribbean Soup, Sunshine of Your Love, Wouldn't You Believe It, that was by Denny Laine and by Baker. You Look Like You Could Use a Rest, Sweet Wine, and I Don't Want to Go On Without You. And wrapped up with Let Me Ride. Now, the beauty now is with the streaming networks, if you go on and you look at Ginger Baker's Air Force 2, they've combined a lot of those titles. You get an extended play, you get a long, well, like 4 albums are in one. I mean, you got the first album, you got the second album. Really, you get a lot of information and a lot of music out of the streaming networks. Personnel on here, we got Ginger Baker on drums. That's the other thing. Ginger Baker on drums here. We have one other guy that does percussion, but on that first live album, 2 other drummers besides Baker. So a lot heavier on the drum section. We also still have Denny Laine playing on here. So he was kind of a regular with Baker. Now, the Air Force didn't last a long time. Baker has recorded other albums with Trio, with other bands. He does have a very extensive catalog. And again, he was just a great drummer. On this one, I think where people had problems is they were still expecting that rock from the Cream era, and he's really taken a turn with the African rhythms and the more world music, then into the more jazzy sound with the horn sections. It's something very different from what he'd done with the previous bands. But certainly well worth a listen. And again, such a great drummer to listen to. It is a piece of history. It's the first 2 albums he recorded after the split from Cream and Blind Faith, and he was kind of changing things around. And I found them a lot of fun. I like the Ginger Air Force 2 a little bit better than the live one, but that was just me. Maybe in the studio it was different. The horn section seemed to be a little more prominent in some of the tunes. So, but that's something to check out. I was torn between, do I do this as a jazz album? Do I do this as classic rock? But certainly Baker, classic rock drummer. And if you haven't checked him out before, or you haven't had a chance to hear him, take a look at some of these albums where he really features not only his playing, but his writing as well. So that's it for Wednesday. Ginger Baker's Air Force. Check them out on the streaming network. I'm sure you'll be pleased with what you hear. We'll see you on Friday when we'll be wrapping up the work week with another fun album. Until then, take care, stay safe. We'll see you on Friday.